Good afternoon. I trust and pray that this Wednesday finds you in the best of health and spirits. A little bit cool on the outside relative to what we've been used to over the course of the last week or so. But you know what? We'll be all right anyway. I love significant changes in the weather like this because it continues to reinforce for me just how much God is in control. You know, the weatherman can only forecast the weather. He can make some predictions based on past experience. Well, y'all know that. We went through this, I think it was last week. But God Himself continually remains in control of the outcomes. And somebody, I think, needed to be reminded of that today. Before we delve into the Bible study, and I'll mention it, or before we delve into our link up to lift up today, I do want to share a fairly important thing. Last night, because of the inclement weather, our food distribution was canceled. The weather was fairly significant last night. My backyard, entire backyard, is covered in limbs and leaves. And at one point, I was out there in the middle of the hailstorm, and it was fairly significant. There are spots on my deck where the paint has been chipped up, and that's within the last day. And the only thing I could think of is that it's as a result of the hail that we received yesterday. But as a result of that, we were unable to carry out our mission of distributing food last night. And so our food bank is going to be open this evening from 6 until 7. And as a result of that, I am canceling tonight's Bible study. Now, I hope y'all will hear me out on this. I am hopeful that as a result of us not having Bible study tonight, that we can get some extra folk to come out tonight and assist with the food distribution. Now, I know some of you may be a little concerned that we are putting off Bible study, and it does not undermine the importance of Bible study at all. It's not indicative of one thing being more important than the other. But I think God provides us in this particular context an opportunity to be ye not only hearers of the word, but doers of the word as well. It's sort of ironic that our Bible study concentration in this particular season is in the book of James. And the book of James is filled with practical applications for walking out this Christian journey. And so, while I know some folk would prefer that we have Bible study whenever it's scheduled, I believe the Lord would have us to attend to the needs of those who are less fortunate than we are. And how do I know that? Because Jesus said that there'll be a point when all will be gathered, and the sheep will be placed on the right, the goats will be placed on the left. And He will say to the goats, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." He said, I was homeless and you didn't provide me any shelter. I was naked, you didn't provide me any clothing, and I was hungry and you didn't feed me. And the people responded, "Lord, when did we ever see you naked? When did we ever see you homeless? When did we ever see you hungry?" And Jesus replied, "Inasmuch as you've done for the least of them, you've done for me." And so I think this Wednesday will provide us an opportunity for some of us to put into action those things that we've been talking about in the book of James. And so I believe that when it comes to prioritizing, you have to make every effort you can to attend as much Bible study as you can. Let's get that clear. But you also need to make every effort to practice the word that you've been studying. And so this evening, we will not have Bible study from 7 until 8. Now, if there is anyone that is really concerned about missing a portion of the lesson or getting fed, you can email me, give me a phone call, and we can set up some individual study where we can just go through the word. But for tonight, I think it would behoove us to take this opportunity to exercise being doers of the word and not just hearers of the word. Amen. Amen. I want to share something with you today. Um, it is a word of encouragement about your faith walk. Um, my wife and I love going to Virginia Beach. We don't go down there to frequent the trendy tourist spots, but we generally go down there to have a little quiet time to ourselves. And normally when we go down there, we'll take 460. 460 is just a nice, quiet route. It takes you down around Petersburg, and then once you get on 460, um, it's pretty much a straight shot onto, I think it's 264 or 664, but the Virginia Beach bypass. And so you can get on the highway at that point. One of the things I've learned in those travels is that, it's a fairly quiet drive. It's a scenic drive, but if there are any mishaps along the way, you can be tied up for quite an awful time there on 460. There aren't any alternative routes once you get on 460. But this time, the last time we went, we took 64. It was during the fall, and we didn't expect to find much traffic traveling to the beach. So we went down, and anybody who has ever traveled from this space down to Virginia Beach, if you take 64, you're going to run into the tunnels. And the tunnels have a sign, even as you enter the tunnel, to stay in your lane and maintain your speed. That you stay in your lane and you maintain your speed. Now, the one thing about that is that everything has to go right when you're in that tunnel. There are giant fans that turn to keep fresh air coming in, and it removes the carbon dioxide that might build up from all the exhaust of the cars that are going through. You drive into the tunnel, and as I said, the sign encourages you to maintain your speed. In other words, you get in that tunnel, you don't tap the brakes, you don't slow down, you don't look for another way out. You keep your foot on the gas and you press forward. Now, I got to tell you, I remember in my younger days when we would make that trip down to Virginia Beach, and we would go into that tunnel. And when I realized that the tunnel literally went under the water, I was terrified. Because if you can imagine, now all it takes is one little thing to go wrong, and we got a major problem. But as I've gotten older, I begin to understand that ride into the tunnel takes a bit of faith. You have to have faith in the construction of the tunnel. You have to have faith that the driver in front of you will not slam on brakes. You have to have faith that the driver next to you won't veer out of their lane and into your car. There's a level of faith involved in making that trek into the tunnel, of faith in so many different things. Faith in the construction of the tunnel, that it's not going to suddenly spring a leak. Now, as we look at the text for this afternoon, God helps us to learn something about faith. And it's not faith in construction. It's not faith in a tunnel. It's not faith in mankind, but faith in the only thing that really matters, and that's Jesus Christ. In John chapter 4, we have the story of Jesus heading back to Capernaum, to Cana of Galilee. It's the place where he first made water into wine. It was the site of his initial miracle. And beginning at verse 46, reading down through 54, it says, "Now he was back in Cana of Galilee, the place where he made the water into wine. Meanwhile, in Capernaum, there was a certain official from the king's court whose son was sick. And when he heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went and asked that he come down and heal his son, who was on the brink of death. And Jesus put him off. Jesus said, 'Unless you people are dazzled by a miracle, you refuse to believe.' But the court official wouldn't be put off. He said, 'Come down, it's life or death for my son.' And Jesus simply replied to him, 'Go home, your son lives.' The man believed the bare word of Jesus, believed the bare word Jesus spoke, and he headed home. And on his way back home, his servants intercepted him and announced, "Your son lives." He asked them what time he began to get better. And they said, "The fever broke yesterday at around 1 o'clock." And the father knew that that was the very moment Jesus had said, "Your son lives." That clinched it. Not only he, but his entire household believed. This was now the second sign Jesus gave after having come from Judea into Galilee. Um, and I want to talk to you for a few minutes just from the subject walking in your faith. Walking in your faith. This story of the nobleman might sound fairly familiar to us. Just a background, the nobleman had a sick son, and this nobleman heard that Jesus had come into Galilee. If you think about it, he had probably seen Jesus do some healing, or he had probably heard that Jesus could heal the sick. And he went to Jesus and he begged him to go with him that he might heal his son. And he wondered aloud just what would need to happen. Would Jesus go and heal his son? You would think in this particular instance, and that is exactly why the nobleman asked Jesus to come with him, that Jesus needed to touch the boy or speak some mystical words of healing over him or something along that line. But verse 48 tells us Jesus put him off. And Jesus put him off because he said, unless you people are dazzled by a miracle, you refuse to believe. And gosh, how many of us today have that very same issue? That we call ourselves walking in faith, but at the very first sign of trouble, we began to look for affirmations. We began to look for signs and symbols that God is going to do just what he said he would do. And my friends, if I might submit to you today, that faith requires that we believe in spite of. Faith requires that we believe in spite of. And the thing we're believing in is what God said, is what God has promised. So I believe that sometimes, even though God has made the promise to us, even though God has spoken to us about a particular event or how he plans to handle a particular situation, that very often we have trouble believing in that simply because of our own lack of faith, that we haven't seen the writing that would confirm what he said. Jesus told this nobleman, he said, unless you people are dazzled by a miracle, you refuse to believe. But this nobleman pressed the mark. He said, look, it's a matter of life or death for my son. I need you to come with me and heal my son. And Jesus said unto him, go home, your son lives. And the Bible says in verse 51, it says, the man believed the bare word Jesus spoke. This is from the Message translation. And he headed home. He believed the bare word that Jesus spoke. In other words, that nobleman took Jesus at his word. Jesus said it, and the nobleman took him at his word. And as that man turned on his heels and marched back in the direction he had just come, he had come from his home to meet Jesus. He turned on his heel and marched back in the direction he had come without any visual signs of confirmation. There was no lightning, there was no thunder, there was no voice that spoke to him and said, it is done. Jesus told him to go home. And that's exactly what he did. He turned on his heel and went home. Now look, this man had to turn around and go home in faith. I have to believe, because this man was just a human being like me, that he may have had his doubts as he walked along. Can I help you with something this morning, or this afternoon rather? A moment of doubt, a reflection on what if, a period of contemplation over what might be, does not disqualify your faith. It does not make your faith null and void. I've come to know that my greatest exercises in faith have been when I questioned, have been when I pondered, yes, have been even when I doubted. But look at what he did. Even if he doubted, even if he wavered for a moment, he kept right on walking. He kept right on pressing. He didn't stop and turn around and go back to Jesus and said, Jesus, are you sure, Jesus? Can you give me a sign? Jesus, what proof will you provide to me that my son would yet live? He didn't. He didn't do any of that. He kept on walking. And the question that is raised by that is, what made this man keep on walking? It was faith. And some of us today need to learn how to keep on walking in spite of what's going on. See, Jesus is just who he says he is. There's no mystery about it. Jesus, earlier, he met the Samaritan woman by the well. And as Jesus detailed for her the shift that would take place in her walk, he said, you got some serious issues in your life. Your finances are tore up. Your health is tore up. Your relationships are torn up. And I know you got issues, because this Christian journey is not an easy one. I know you struggle. I know you got a sister that's sick, and it breaks your heart. I know your son, your uncle, your nephew is sick, and it breaks your heart. I know your mother's health continues to fail or falter. This Christian journey is not easy, my friends. And so he continues his walk. And even as he continues his walk, he is met by his servants. And his servants affirm for him that his son is well. And he says, look, when did this happen? When did this happen? And they told him it happened yesterday about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Whatever time it was, he knew that the time his son began to get well coincided with the time Jesus told him to go home, that your son will live. And somebody needs to hear this today, that sometimes there are things in life you won't see until you believe. I know the conventional wisdom is seeing is believing, but my friends, in this Christian walk that we have, sometimes believing allows you to see. See, he started his walk based on the word that Jesus shared with him. Your son lives. And he continued that walk in spite of any doubts that may have popped up in his mind. And because he continued that walk, he met his servants who affirmed for him that his faith was not in vain. They affirmed for him that Jesus had done just what he said he would do. They affirmed for him that his son was better now than he was when he left. They affirmed for him that healing has begun on your son and that he shall live. It was nobody but Jesus. That's what he learned. It was nobody but Jesus who told death to back up and behave. It was nobody but Jesus who declared to death, not this time. And I don't know who you are this afternoon, but you need to be reminded today, my friends, that even though things may look bleak, even though things may look sort of dark for you, remember, you've got to continue your walk in faith. You have got to continue your journey in faith. You can't turn around now. You've come too far. God has brought you a mighty long way. And as you look back over your journey, you realize that there were a lot of things God has done for you, that God has made ways when you knew there was no way to be made. He has provided situations where you know it was nothing but God that got you through it. you ran out of money. It was nothing but God that got you through it. Your health was failing. It was nothing but God that got you through it. Your money was funny. It was nothing but God that got you through it. Relationships were falling apart and suddenly they were mended again. It was nothing but God that got you through it. I want you to be encouraged today. I want you to continue to remember that God is the same today as he was on yesterday, as he will be on tomorrow, that God never changes, God never falters, and God does just what he said he will do. You can walk in faith when it comes to the promises of God. You can walk in faith when it comes to God fulfilling what he said he would do. I hope this message serves to just reinvigorate you today, that this message serves to confirm and affirm for you that your faith is not lost on God, that your faith is not wasted on God, that God is just who he has always declared himself to be, and that it is the faith that we have in his son Jesus that allows us to be able to continue this faith walk. And I pray that something blessed you today. And again, just a reminder, if you're just tuning in or you may have missed the announcement a little bit early, I'll be sending an email out to this effect as well. But we will not be having a Bible study tonight. Our food distribution, our food bank distribution was canceled last night because of the inclement weather. But we still have work to do. And so in order to do that work, we're going to cancel our Bible study tonight in the hope that some folk who would normally attend Bible study are able to come out and assist with the distribution of food. Remember, we're studying the book of James. And the book of James tells us that we ought not just to be hearers of the word, but doers of the word as well. God bless you, and may heaven continue